5, 4, 3.
Thanks, and welcome anyone who is watching, and to those of you right with us on the screen here, we're starting our second public hearing, so to speak, of our fiscal year budget that we're going to be voting on tomorrow night as a full school board. And I can see there was one email today that, Pete, you can explain, because I think you went back and forth with that person in our email file. So that email address, in case anyone is watching wants to email a question, is it comments@rsu13.org? Yes, okay.
Comments at rsu13.org.
Yep.
I can actually change my name to that if you want.
That's a good idea. Yep, good idea. For anybody watching, we are all coming to you from home, except for Jeff. I think you're on site at South School, right? And that's correct. So, John, anything you want to say to start off tonight?
Yeah, we just attended graduation 2020 at the airport, Knox County Regional Airport at Owl's Head. Absolutely wonderful. Had 89 graduates. And led in a procession by the Knox County Sheriff, Rockland Police Department, and the Rockland Fire Department. Absolutely wonderful ceremony. I think people enjoyed it very much. Lauren, I know you attended. I think Susan, I think you attended too. And I attended. And it was great. And I'm going to let Lauren, why don't you share the news about the Freshman Academy that we learned at the graduation?
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time sitting in my seat with this kind of stuff, but Hannah Fazy, who works with the Freshman Academy, she analyzed the numbers, and of the 76 students who were part of the Freshman Academy, 74 graduated. You know, that's high 90s number. And that's the first year we had Freshman Academy. We've had it now ever since then. It's a style that starts with strong relationships with every single student, following up in freshman year with every single student to make sure they're on track. And it is solid evidence that works. It works around the country, but we have solid evidence that it works. And it is so incredibly gratifying to know that we as a school unit, as a school board, as staff, as admin team have made decisions like that to add to our curriculum that make an amazing difference to student success. So just couldn't be better news. It just could not be better news. And again, today's graduating class was the first one to go through from freshman year with Freshman Academy as their basis. So it is proof that it works.
Yeah, we've come a long ways from a graduation rate of 74% in 2014.
A long ways.
A long ways. So we're getting results, and that's my message, is that, you know, no matter what, our school system is now performing very well. I think we are living up to our mission and our vision to educate students. So the money's well spent, and I absolutely understand about taxpayers being hard pressed. There is absolutely no question. I mean, I know in every town in Maine and lots of towns across the country, you know, taxes have consistently gone up. But we get results, and that's the difference between a poor school system that you pay a lot for and a good school system that you pay a lot for. And you could have either one, and I'm determined that we'll have a good school system. So that's my opening message.
Yeah, good opening message. Susan, anything you want to add about today's graduation ceremony that you witnessed?
I thought it was just fabulous, and it was so much fun to see how the families enjoyed it as well as the graduates. And I can't tell you how many people I heard say that it was much more comfortable than being in the hot gym. But it was great.
Yeah.
The speeches by the valedictorian, salutatorian were wonderful. And it was just fun to watch all that happiness.
Yeah, it's a classic situation when you're given lemons, make great lemonade out of it. So it was a fantastic ceremony. I was so pleased. Just fantastic. Yep. Okay, so we'll move on then to the budget discussion. And Pete, do you want to start off with anything you were just mentioning about zero impact to towns and what that overall and what that means?
I can do that. Is that how we, is there any reason to kind of recap a little bit from last night, or do you want to just kind of start afresh with the new questions and?
Whatever you want to approach, whatever you want to do. Yep. Follow your lead on that.
I think, all right, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go back and use that presentation a little bit. I've done some FAQs on that as well. But the first step, I think, is to go and all right. Can you see the slide?
Not yet. There we go. See it now.
So just going back to the priorities, which is really a year of maintaining, not adding to things, but down to the black, I think is trying to reduce our spending to only that statutory or other unavoidable increases. Really address the economic disruption to the local and state economies, and consider reductions that are structural in nature and sustainable over multiple budget years, because even though we have no formal announcements or predictions from the governor, we think this is probably going to be a multi-year event, given what has happened so far. We've fallen so far and so fast that we don't think that there's any way of avoiding this to be something that won't come back and haunt us in the next budget year. The budget itself is up by $919,000. That is about the same as our net increase in revenue from the state. The $919,000 includes $675,000 of pay increases. Although we know that many of the staff have already agreed to not taking pay increases for next year, given the uncertainty of a possible curtailment. One question that we did get today from a taxpayer in Rockland was, the budget shows an increase for both the business manager and superintendent. And because we're both here, I don't mind talking about us too. But we both agreed that we're not going to take any increase, so that our contracts require it, because we're the only two, I think, right now that are actually in a multi-year contract that carry over to fiscal 21. Again, because of the uncertainty, we are going to hold our pay, but that money is still in there, and I guess because it's contractual, it makes sense to keep that number in there with the budget. It just will be one of those unspent line items, we hope. Or maybe we don't hope. Maybe we hope that the economy will come back and it won't be an issue. The next piece, this was a question that came up, and it's come up in a couple different versions, especially from Al's head. We presented a budget that overall is $1,600 more in taxpayer money than last year. It's relatively out of a $31 million budget, $32 million budget. It's up just over $1,000 to taxpayers, but it's very uneven how that's being distributed. While some towns are actually seeing increases, some are seeing decreases. And the question is why. One of the biggest towns that is concerned is Owl's Head. And Owl's Head is seeing an increase in their taxes, even with zero impact overall, of about $180,000. So we've been going through and kind of helping those that don't understand the funding formula, why that works, why that's happening. And really what's happening is the budgets, the local amounts of taxes are based on two big pieces of data. The biggest is the relative number of students that come from each town. And as your relative number of students increase, your relative share of the local taxes needed to be raised increase. The other piece is relative property value. So if your property value in your town is increasing at a greater rate than other towns around you in 5 towns district, that would be also a reason for that to increase. There are other pieces that if a town is already at the maximum amount that the state thinks that they can raise for the required local piece of the taxes, then any additional comes right from the state. They pay 100% of that additional extra. While if your town is not receiving subsidy, that burden falls on the local town. So there's a lot of pieces to how the state actually calculates that minimum amount that it thinks that just the basic education services would require. That affects increases or decreases. This kind of goes through and shows how taxes were calculated based on a zero impact budget. So if you were to look down here, this is the net increase for the taxpayer from fiscal 20 to fiscal 21, $1,600. Now here, this is what, based on the state's formula, this is the increase that they said the towns needed to increase their local spending on education by. This was the minimum amount the towns needed to spend on that. This takes about subsidy as well. So in some cases, the town picked up the share for some of the communities when it reached a certain level. The local share is an offset. So because we focus on a zero tax impact, we reduce the additional local piece. You can see how in this calculation, towns that had increasing student population relative to other towns saw an increase in the required amount. You can see how that distribution worked. Owl's Head saw the biggest share of $300,000. It saw well over 65% of the entire increase was from Owl's Head. A large share coming from Cushing, and then some from South Thomaston. The towns that were already receiving the subsidy were already maxed out with their subsidy. They saw small declines in what they were required to raise because they were already receiving, they were already tapped out according to the state calculation of what they should be raising. You can see here at this total local, even with a zero tax impact budget, the distribution really changes by a lot. And this primarily for this year was being driven by student counts. That's what the state uses for their part, and we use that for 75% of our local part too. Owl's Head has seen an increase of their students, relative students, from a low of 8.5% 3 years ago to almost 10.5% now. So they went through a period of decline in terms of the relative population of students. But the last 3 years, they've seen that really bounce back. And I don't know this for certain, but I think anecdotally, we could probably look to a brand new school in that community that might be drawing some families to the area. I think our board member is probably nodding, knowing that that's probably happening. The last two pieces, and this was another question, was about the payback of the error in subsidy from fiscal 19 that we received as a result of the state miscalculating its estimated number of new pre-K students for us. If you recall, it estimated that we were going to add over 140 new pre-K students in 1 year. And by doing so, and that was a new addition to the legislation that forced them to do that. In doing so, it overestimated our required local amounts for that year. And by doing so, it over subsidized the Rockland and Thomaston required local amounts. So those two towns benefited by about $628,000. Thomaston by about 225,000 and 400,000 or so for Rockland. And so we've negotiated with the state, and this is the first year of that payback, and that's why those two towns are the only two that are actually paying back the subsidy. Rockland and Thomaston were the only two towns that benefited FY19 by being over subsidized. If we hadn't had that error, those amounts would have been the responsibility of those two towns in fiscal 19. The next question that I received, we received a couple last night from board members. So why is the special ed increase of around 7%? And so part of the reasons, so I went through today and just double checked all this. We are hiring more experienced educators in special ed, and by doing so, their salary scale is higher. So we're seeing about $40,000 extra in experience in terms of total budget. We had an adjustment to our speech scale this past year, and that was intended to allow us to hire speech and language pathologists and not contract. So while it saw an increase in the salary for that position, for those 4 positions, it actually hiring speech personnel will save us in the long run by not having to contract that out at a much higher rate. The contracted pay increase in that Article 2 special ed is about $175,000. The increase of benefits to that same group is $154,000. We've seen an increase in our sub costs because subs in ed tech subs in special ed are, for the most part, legally mandated to be there for numbers, for counts. So this is just the budget catching up to what we're actually spending as we use those subs to replace ones that are out for whatever reason, whether they could be any number of reasons. The budget includes a reduction of 4 ed techs, which were offset by 1.5 teachers, and this is part of a change that our special ed director made last year, swapping personnel and bringing in more professionals and less support because it worked for her program. Professional development was reduced by $15,000. Supplies overall were $7,000. A lot of this is directly related to some of the special needs of some of the programs, whether it be PT or OT. We have a building fee for our that came out of a different article that added to this article. So it's not an increase to the budget, it's an increase to this article. And then as we reduce the budget to zero impact, we reduce it a little bit extra. So we actually put a little bit of money in a contingency here. Again, these are the budget is, the authority to spend. It does not mean we're spending it. I mean, every one of these lines in the entire budget, we're going to do our best to control. We're going to be working on keeping positions open as long as we can. We're going to be, questioning any kind of other expense that we need. And we know that we need to, zero impact tax budget or not, we know that we have got to manage the expenses this year in a way that we've never been able to in a way that I think we need to, because of our belief that the likelihood of a subsidy curtailment is more than it has been in other years. Even though the governor has been silent on this, the commissioner has been vocal on the fact that they plan to protect subsidy over any other part of the budget. I think we're just doing what we can as a district to be as conservative in our revenue estimates as possible, given what we have to recognize, because that is our subsidy number right now, and there's been nothing to say that's not going to be, so we do have to use it. There was another question about the athletic budget percent, and so this goes to the increases. There's a salary increase of $3,000. Again, that is one that is an estimated increase that's not going to be spent right now, because that's a contract that we have to go to the board first for an increase. Stipends, the overall stipend increase is increased by $16,000, and that was due to a new contract that included the stipend amounts that was increased for the first time in, I think, 10 years. Benefits and taxes, $8,000. Referees, timers, and security, we've gone back and analyzed what we've been spending and adjusted that upward. And our supplies, $4,000. If you go back years of this athletic budget, we've been cutting it back every single year, probably in the last 5 years, as much as we can, really trimming down what was a budget that wasn't that accurate. And we've also, on the other side, we've actually accounted for tens of thousands of dollars in revenue that was not being accounted for in prior years before 2014 also. So overall, I think we're just kind of going back a little bit more. We may have overcut the budget, but this is just going back and looking at the actuals to see what that number should be. Again, the total increase was the high percentage is $44,000. Another question we got last night was about transportation. And while I think when we first talked about this in February, transportation, we went back and our transportation expenses have increased substantially, mostly because of our transportation during the day, taking students to and from private schools is one part of the morning and evening, but also we have a lot of students requiring tutoring services that either come to central office or they go to other schools to receive that tutoring service. So what we've done is we went back and we really analyzed the actual driver's hours that we were using, that we were actually spending it on, and adjusting the budget to reflect that. That was in February. Since then, we've gone through this, and in this budget iteration that you're seeing tonight, I look at transportation as part of operations. There are a lot of staff that are shared between the two, between facilities and transportation. We have a position called bus driver custodian. It's a full-time position that will do bus duties during the school year, and then custodial on holidays, vacations, summer. So when I look at this, I look at the two together. And so what I would encourage you to do is to look at the two together and what that increase is together, which is still even given the relative increase in our hours to drivers, is somewhat reasonable, much more than it was in February. This goes through the breakout of the increases. You can see that really the building and grounds numbers went down overall while transportation went up. So about 234,000 between the two out of a combined budget of about $4.7 million. The next question that I received today, and maybe I'll wait for the individual to ask it, and she just showed up, or she came in during the conversation, is Chelsea, and you were going to ask about substitutes. So if you wanted to kind of frame that the way you'd like it framed, I can try to answer that for you.
Well, so a couple of years ago, before I joined the board, I chatted with Pete and John about subs because at the time we were spending over $1 million, it looked like, on substitutes. And so I'm curious to get an update on what we're spending now. And then I may have some follow-ups. I don't think that I have enough information at the moment, but I'm really curious to see what we are spending, particularly in thinking about, is this the highest and best use of our funds? But I need more information before I can say more than that.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Thanks. That's where I thought you were going with the question. We didn't really get into the actual question when we talked today, but it's certainly something we've been talking about. It was being talked about by this board probably 10 years ago. I can see old board meetings when this was an issue. And while we don't see an abuse of sick days in the district, we really don't. I think that our average employee uses about 9 days total of sick and personal time during the course of a year. There is that 5% that see sick days as an entitlement. I think that every business has that problem. I don't think overall that we do. So the reasons that we have sick are your traditional, people call out sick for short and long term, short term that are either because of long term sickness, illness, or injury that's outside of work. And they can use their personal sick time or access to sick bank, and an individual can actually bank up to, depending on the contract, 150 days of sick time. Again, this is not earned time. This is time that is conditional. It's got to be used for that purpose. But in the case of, in the worst case of cancer, an individual could use that treatments or whatever. The other thing that we see a lot of is workers' comp. So if there's a workers' comp, we do our best to make sure that individual can come back to work, usually on light duty if it's possible for some of those jobs. But if they can't, then they would go out and use their sick days for that, which will require, and all these usually require sub for most positions. And there are other health needs that are documented by medical professionals. Something that we've, that's I think biased our sub numbers for a long time is how we've accounted for long-term subs. So not every sub is created equal. Some subs are actually used to fill an open position, in which case, if we can't hire a world language teacher at the middle school, we might be able to hire a substitute in that position long-term that might not need some of the certifications over a shorter period that we would to fill the position full-time. And as you think about this, as a position. as a position. Raise your hand if you have trouble hearing me because I'm getting a internet. Having trouble? All right. I told you I've got 3 people doing Zoom calls in my house tonight.
That'll do it. Overload of the network.
So I guess my point is that we have been miscoding, in my opinion, and inflating our actual sub numbers because we've not been coding them to the position that actually has the savings in it when it comes to long-term subs. We did a total revamp of our earning codes in January and February, and started implementing how we actually code our subs to make sure that we can document our historical much better. So we're now looking how we do that and actually trying to create a history to account for our actual true sub costs. The other thing that we are looking for next year, and what we were actually looking to do this year, but the year kind of ended short, is that we are looking to restrict positions in which we allow subs. So not every position that we traditionally need a sub or hire a sub for may require it. So we're going to look at every position in the district and decide whether that position would need a sub if the person in that position is gone for a day or 2. And we're going to try to restrict that to really what is the best interest of the students, of their safety, and in some cases, legal mandates that require certain student to adult ratios in the classroom. This is kind of a bit of summary of what we're spending on subs. So in fiscal 18, we were spending just over $500,000. It was about the same in 19. In fiscal 20, we reduced the budget because we were trying to come up with this new way of actually accounting for that properly. We are currently over that in terms of our subs. And part of that is because we didn't implement the coding changes until recently. And then 2021 budget goes back to a number that we're trying to estimate a little bit closer. For comparisons, if you forgive my typo, I went through the July to March periods because of this strange year we had, and tried to look at the history of those time periods and what we've done. Again, this isn't a true reflection because we didn't have a lot of subs, obviously, in the last 3 months, but we did have some, because something that we have, I think, at least 3 people, 3 teachers who are out on maternity leave, and we've got one more that's out on another medical leave, but they have long-term subs that were in their positions that were still through the year providing educational resources to students and interacting with them. But it also partially is because we've taken some of the coding and properly coded some of those positions in a position that's open as opposed to as a sub position. And I suspect a question after that.
Let me just say, Pete, that, once again, just thank you so much for all your hard work. That was incredible to turn that around in a day. I know how hard you're working these days to get this all done. I just want to thank you again. It's fantastic.
Well, I appreciate the questions ahead of time. It helps me prepare, and I appreciate if any come up tonight, I think there will still be time for tomorrow to address any that might still be concerning.
Yeah, sure. So I'm looking at the email. Don't see anything. For all you guys here in the meeting, any questions you have right now? Chelsea, go ahead.
So Pete, since I came in late, and I apologize, my other meeting we were doing interviews, and so we were trying to corral like half a dozen of us, and it was complicated. So at any rate, we went much later than we thought we would. But at any rate, Pete, I missed part of the special education. Can you send me that slideshow so I can take a look at it? Because I also assume you had a few slides before I showed up. I was curious, I'm looking back at the original special education proposal to minimize the impact to taxpayers, and it mentioned eliminating 6 ed tech positions. And in the slide, you mentioned 4. So I was wondering what was the reason for that change?
I don't know.
Okay.
It wasn't intentional. It was, and I think that, you know, when Jess and I go back and forth with her known positions, what she has and what I know in the budget purpose and within the budget, I think we sometimes, well, I'll say I sometimes miss some of the changes that she makes. So I've had errors in my budget because I haven't caught some of the changes she's made. That may be one of them.
Okay.
Amy, I know you had questions about summer and food programs. John, I think you've got an idea.
Actually, they've got that resolved now, so it's not an issue.
Oh, okay.
So I've reached out to them too, and we're trying to connect to make sure that the kids are being fed. And I think right now they're tapping into the Lincoln County. So a lot of these programs are run by private nonprofits. We just happen to be a school doing a summer food program in the state, and I think, you know, as John and Lauren and I have talked in the past, and is that we're going to keep watching this, and if it makes sense for us to jump in at some point, if, you know, if things really change, and when we do expect that, while July still might be a month where there's not a lot of need in terms of many families because of the extra unemployment funding that's going into people's paychecks. I know that in discussions that I've had with the AIO food pantry, we do expect something to change possibly as soon as August, especially if the unemployment, if the paycheck protection program, you know, ends the way it's anticipated right now. So I think that it's something to keep an eye on, and we plan to do that. We don't want to leave anybody out in the cold or hungry if we can help it.
Chelsea.
I feel like I'm a little more confused by the lunch program than I was last time. So I'm wondering if I can have like just a high level overview of what we've offered in previous summers, what we're offering this summer, and also just funding sources, because my assumption was this was all funded by a federal grant, but I'm not sure what we're doing this summer versus last summer.
So the summer food program is a program that's independent of the school system. We're involved as the sponsor organization, but we are only we're doing so because we were contacted years ago by a number of community members to do so. We had the kitchens, we had a director at the time that was totally behind that and was one of the instigators of the program. We had a member of the Thomason community, Audrey Levering, who's was instrumental in that, as well as raising funds. It's a program that overall probably costs about $40,000 to $45,000 a year. About half of that is reimbursed through the federal summer lunch program, and most of the other amounts were either donated by private organizations or was actually volunteer work by our director, as well as in the community that would help with the program. But for the RSU, it was basically it was a wash revenue-wise and expense-wise. It really isn't part of our nutrition program.
So I thought that what the food we've been offering kids during the summer was, or sorry, during the school year after the COVID disaster. I thought that was an expansion of this program. Is that correct?
It was a way for the federal government to channel money to schools in a non-traditional way. So the traditional school lunch program model didn't work in terms of reimbursements for breakfast and lunch and snacks. And this was a way that they were able to come up with that allowed us to be basically paid per student for a number of meals. So we got a fixed amount of dollars to serve breakfast and lunch together for every student. And that amount was much higher than the traditional reimbursement rate that we get for the school lunch program during the school year. So they funneled the money and they modified the rules of the summer lunch program, I think probably because it was easier and faster to get it done. But really, so we went from, on March 16th, we went from our traditional food lunch program to our summer lunch program, which is easier to manage in terms of our collecting data. It doesn't require it's a much easier program to actually account for. So from a bookkeeping standpoint, where it might take me 4 or 5 hours to put together the reimbursement for a lunch for a month of lunches and breakfast traditionally, we could usually get this done in 15 or 20 minutes.
So, all right, so just to be clear, so we've been providing students food under this expanded program, and then it's going to be picked up by community groups. And if we need to, we will pick it back up to make sure that students are served continuously until school starts, whatever that looks like.
So this is probably going to work in 2 ways. That the summer lunch program, the traditional summer lunch program, which was a program to serve, was a congregate feeding program where meals were taken to a location, usually a camp style, day camp style program. Thomas Rec is one. Rockland Rec had 2. The Y had 3. There was a number of 6 locations that we would provide those lunches for, and then basically they'd be dropped off in coolers, and the staff would distribute, and they'd eat together in a congregate style setting. That will be done. It looks like that the Lincoln County group, the Healthy Meals or Healthy something, that is going to be doing that for the traditional summer lunch program. We are working with AIO, who also worked with Salvation Army, who also works with the backpack program, we hope, to make sure that we can get food to other families. So the other families that aren't part of the camps, we're going to work with them on putting together possibly lunches for a week, but giving them all the ingredients, and then they'll make it. So bulk style delivery or pickup of food for families that are in need. And I see that being a second program, not aligned with the traditional summer lunch program that's being taken over by the Healthy Meals program.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, or ideas? And I'm looking at the screen over here for emails, don't see any coming in. Well, with that, yes, Jeff. Okay, thank you. There's a telephone on the screen. Is that a board member on the phone?
So Doug was going to have to call in today. He was watching, so he may be one of those people.
Oh, okay, all right.
So he was going to call in to listen, I believe, was his plan.
Okay. All right, so seeing no, John, anything you want to finish up with tonight as we close out this hearing?
I just want to thank the board members who were able to attend these two budget hearings and any community members that were able to log on or wanted to log on. And I would also offer that even after the budget hearings are done, if community members have questions, you can still send those in and we will do our level best to answer them between now and the referendum. So.
Okay, thank you. So we meet tomorrow night at 6 p.m. to vote on and adopt the superintendent's budget. That's what we'll do. And then, to be clear, we're not obviously having any sort of public meeting because this sufficed due to the governor's order. And then voters vote on July 14th. So what do we have to do about signing things? I know we can talk about it tomorrow night, but I just have the question right now. I forget what we have to do about signing things, and we'll have to develop a procedure on how to do that in a contactless way.
So what's going to probably happen is, and this just changed yesterday. The warrant will be, we will issue a warrant for the referendum tomorrow. It may actually also be a warrant for a public hearing as well. I've got to check that. I've seen some of the language. We actually went ahead and thought that having a public hearing before adoption of a budget by the board was a better idea than having public hearings after the board adopted it. It seemed like it was in the spirit of public input, even though we were rushed. We thought that, and we, I mean, John and Lauren and I think that we talked about this, that it was better to do it this way, and possibly both ways, than to try to just wait until after the budget was passed by the board and there really was no way for anybody to get input. But I think the idea is that there may be a necessity to have another meeting or two at some point over the next month to answer any questions from the public about the budget before they vote, because this time they're actually going to be voting on the articles. The articles will be laid out in dollar amounts and in a much different way. It's not going to be a single question. It could be actually up to 6 or 8 questions for the public to vote on, including the overall budget, the adult ed budget, the debt portion of the budget, the piece that we appropriate to, or we raise to transfer to the nutrition program of $300,000. It will likely have 2 separate articles for the Midcoast School of Technology. So they'll have their own articles to be voted on for the first time by the public. So again, I'm still waiting to see the final edition of what the ballots will look like. But
Pete, I guess this is news to me because we went through the executive order with the commissioner and the deputy commissioner, and there was no discussion of having to have yet another budget hearing after adoption by the board. It listed a number of things that districts could do, but it didn't say anything about after adoption you need to have another hearing. So I guess, is that coming from the attorneys or?
no, this actual is coming from what I read in what is going to be presented at another board tomorrow night at the same time. And so I have not seen the warrant yet. So that's what I'm waiting for. And I think because we've done this already, and this is all coming from the same lawyer. We all use the same lawyer. So it's more, I think, an informational session, not a hearing.
I'll withhold my comment.
Okay. The other part is, for the first time, voters will vote on separate budget lines. Is that accurate?
Well, so Articles 1 through 11, our $1 amount budget will be voted on as one question.
Okay. That's really good. I mean, yeah.
Again, I'm still, the attorneys were working on warrants and ballots in the order of the district having the meeting. So the Wednesday group hasn't happened yet. It's going to
Okay.
be a busy day tomorrow.
Okay.
But absentee ballots go out on Friday, right? So this has to all be figured out by the end of the week.
So the plan is that I've talked to the towns, and my plan is to get them out there by Friday, possibly on Thursday, to towns like South Thomaston that are closed on Friday. But obviously, this process is such that even we got a draft copy of what a ballot might look like on Monday, there's no way of sending them to the printers like we would normally do. So this is going to be very local.
How is it actually going to work? Like, I still don't understand the mechanism, and maybe I just need to wait for my absentee ballot. But like, what you sent us on Monday, you sent us something earlier in the week. Is that what is going to be in our envelope?
The last 2 pages that actually had the ballot piece, that was Friday's version. That changed on Monday. So there's more articles on there. So my concern is that it's going to be a multi-page, not just over, two-sided. It might be two-sided stapled. So it's going to be a busy day tomorrow. You'll know when I know, pretty much.
So by
If
tomorrow
they're signing, that's going to be, I will send you a document to be signed individually. And what I will need is the document to be signed and either, a photograph taken and sent back, that way. And then I'll just accumulate all the different signature pages to attach to the warrant.
Okay. Is that Doug? Do you want to? Is that you on the phone? Want to talk?
Yeah, Lauren, I was going to jump in real quick, and then I go back to mute again. I just want to thank John and Pete for the good work that they did on this budget. It's been a very, very difficult budget, and I think that I think that what the public should understand is we really don't know what the final outcome is going to be, no matter what it is. But we're going to just have to work with it in a very difficult and challenging year. And I also, just as a side comment, because I came in just a hair late when you were talking about graduation, and I just want to give a special shout out to 93.3 for having that on the radio, because I was parked in a maze of cars and I couldn't see a thing. And so without that, I would not been able to hear everything that was going on. So I'd like to say thank you to them as well publicly.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. That was fantastic. That was inspired to do it like that. Thanks to them. Yep. Okay, well, that being it, I think, and then unless someone else wants to jump in on anything, let's call it a night. We can finish here at just about almost 8 o'clock. And I look forward to seeing all your bright and shiny faces tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. Pete, I guess we'll have more information, and it's our COVID year. We make the best of it that we can, and we'll see what happens. So thank you all. Thank you, Pete, for all your hard work. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight, and see you tomorrow night.
Good night, all.
Good night.